Why were the children of Israel afraid to come near Moses? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus 34. We're going to be reading from verses 29 to 35. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus 34, beginning at verse 29. Now it was so, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with them. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. Then Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him. And Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the children of Israel came near, and he gave them as commandments all the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And he would come out and speak to the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, the skin of Moses' face shone. Then Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went in to speak with him. In this chapter, we have seen Moses on the top of Mount Sinai renewing the covenant between God and Israel. This covenant needed renewal because Israel forsook it when they worshipped the golden calf. God would not accept them in idolatry. In fact, it took the fervent prayer of Moses to prevent him from killing them. But even though God relented, that did not mean that Israel went unpunished, for God would punish them at the end of chapter 32. After 40 days and 40 nights, the covenant was now renewed, and the second tablets of stone written by the finger of God were remade. So Moses came down from Mount Sinai. This time when he came down, he did not find Israel worshiping an idol. He did not even find them off doing some other sin. He came to find Israel waiting for him in the camp. Israel had clearly learned their lesson, and along with it, some patience, since Moses was gone for the exact same amount of time, almost 6 weeks. When Moses came down from the mountain, the skin of his face was shining bright, though Moses did not know it. The question is, why did Moses' face shine? One possibility is because he was in the presence of God, but since his face didn't shine the first time he came down the mountain, this possibility can be discarded. Another possibility is that he had seen God, even if it was only God's back, and so it could be that because of that, Moses' face was shining. On its face, this sounds plausible because Moses didn't see God the first time he went up Mount Sinai, thus accounting for why Moses' face didn't shine the first time he came down. However, a closer examination of the language of this chapter, as well as reading 2 Corinthians 3, which we will do when we study that book, will show us that even this possibility is not correct. When Moses' face shone, what was he doing? Verse 32 says that Moses was giving them all the commandments of the Lord that were spoken to Moses on Mount Sinai. Therefore, Moses' face shone because the law that he was giving them was a glorious law, because it was given directly from God. We often call the Old Testament law the law of Moses, named after the man who proclaimed it to Israel. We do not do wrong to do so, for even Jesus refers to this law in a similar fashion. However, we must also recognize that this was God's law, for it was given to Moses directly by God. Moses didn't devise these rules for Israel to follow or these sacrifices that Israel were to offer. God did. And because God is glorious, God's law is glorious. We might ask, though, but this law couldn't remit sin, so how could it be glorious? The book of Galatians would tell us that this law was meant to bring Israel to Christ and would foreshadow the once-for-all sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. God didn't create a law that wouldn't accomplish its purpose, for that wouldn't be in God's nature. He created a law, a glorious law for Israel to follow, and if they followed it, when the Messiah came and pointed them to the new covenant, they should have easily been able to transition to it, for the Messiah would fulfill all of this law in order to usher in the new. Now, yes, we know that on the whole, Israel rejected Jesus, but they shouldn't have. They should have been perfectly positioned to accept him because this law was pointing them to him. Now, when Israel saw that Moses' face shone, they were afraid to come near him. And you want to know what? I would have been afraid too. People's faces don't normally shine. Was Moses' face on fire? Was this actually Moses or some kind of other being? Moses called out to them, and the rulers and Aaron came to hear what Moses had to say. Afterwards, Moses then talked to all the people, giving to them the words of the Lord. However, when he was finished speaking, he put a veil over his face in order for them to be able to look directly on him. Moses would wear this veil while in the presence of Israel, but would remove it while in the presence of God when he was receiving instruction. Moses would then tell Israel what God had commanded and then cover his face again. How long did Moses have to veil his face? We're not sure. In fact, I cannot find it being mentioned again until Paul does so in 2 Corinthians 3. From the language of verse 35, though, it would seem that when God was commanding Israel concerning their law, that Moses' face shone, signifying to Israel that what Moses was speaking was commanded by God and to be followed. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 35, verses 1 to 9, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.